Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see you. Thank you for coming out to join us this morning for the State of the State address for the Central Bucks Chamber of Commerce. It is certainly a glorious day, and we couldn't ask for better weather. We have our distinguished speakers that I know you're all eager to hear from. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Teresa Farry, and I'm the President and CEO of the Central Bucks Chamber of Commerce. We're delighted and grateful to have Secretary Rick Siger as our keynote speaker today. In addition, we welcome our Pennsylvania legislators, Senator Frank Farry, Senator Steve Santarsiero, State Representatives Tim Brennan, Shelby Labs, Brian Munroe and Perry Warren, and our County Commissioners Bob Harvie and Diane Ellis-Marseglia. Thank you for coming. If I may ask you to all stand so that we can say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So the response to this event has been phenomenal, as you can see. We're delighted that you're here once again, and I would personally like to extend my welcome and thanks to all of you for making this such a successful program. It's no surprise we have a full house, considering we are featuring Secretary Siger today and 6 Pennsylvania state legislators who have devoted their careers to Pennsylvania and supporters of our chamber and the community. So before I introduce Secretary Siger, I would like to express our gratitude to the team at Delaware Valley University for hosting us today. As you can see, it's a beautiful venue. And the Bucks County Herald, who is our media sponsor. I would also like to recognize our videographer, Tom Brunt from Ted Webb Innovations, and Amy McDermott from Heart and Soul Portraits. Now I would like to acknowledge our sponsors for the event: Independence Blue Cross, Comcast, Delaware Valley University, and CNN Bank. We're so appreciative for your support and making the State of the State possible today. I would love to invite 2 of our sponsors to say a few words on behalf of your respective organizations. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ben Rusalowski, the President of Delaware Valley University.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Teresa. I extend a warm welcome to all of you today on behalf of Delaware Valley University. We are thrilled to have you with us. We are well into the fall semester, and I'm very happy to say we have our highest full-time enrollment in the last 10 years here on campus. I said that last year, but we broke the record again this year. So we're very excited about that and having you be here today as part of our community. I want to give a warm welcome to the Secretary as well as our state senators and representatives who are here with us. We're very pleased to host this event again on our campus. We truly value our relationships and partnerships in the community, and I'm very thankful to both Teresa and Kevin and the Chamber for this opportunity. One of the 6 core values in our Del Val community is to value the world of ideas and differences. Our community recognizes the necessity of cultivating curiosity and honoring diversity. We engage with ideas that challenge us and with people different from ourselves, showing deep respect for diverse points of view and backgrounds. In fact, we sponsor engagements like this throughout the year, as well as a colloquium series through our School of Business, Arts, and Sciences, and an interdisciplinary lecture series through our One Health initiative. These events are free and open to the public, and I certainly encourage you to visit our website and look at our calendar and hope to see you at future discussions. We thank you again for allowing us to be a neutral convener on discussion topics that touch all of us, and we certainly look forward to what I know will be a wonderful program this morning. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Ben. And now let's welcome Andrew Berinato, Director of Government Affairs from Independence Blue Cross.
Thank you, Teresa. It's truly a pleasure to be here this morning with you all. It's truly a thrill to meet you, Teresa. Teresa's brother is my boss, so I hope to leave here with some dirt today.
I've been taking pictures.
I come from a chamber family. My mother has run the Chamber of Commerce in Ocean City, New Jersey for almost 20 years, so I truly appreciate the work that you all do here, the community events, the networking events. I know it's the day-to-day blocking and tackling to grow and support local businesses. At Independence Blue Cross, we're celebrating 85 years of doing just that, very similar work. So it's an honor to be here and support the Chamber, and we're looking forward to the presentation today with the Secretary and our state reps and state senators. So thanks for being here, and look forward to a great program. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. And now for the reason we are all here. Secretary Rick Siger became the Secretary of the Department of Community and Economic Development on May 3rd, 2023, when the Pennsylvania Senate unanimously confirmed Governor Josh Shapiro's nomination. In his current role, Rick leads the Commonwealth's efforts to grow our economy and build a better future for Pennsylvania. He is committed to helping small businesses thrive, spurring innovation and increasing opportunities in communities to make Pennsylvania a national leader in growth and innovation. Secretary Siger served President Barack Obama for more than 7 years in multiple roles, including Chief of Staff at the White House Office of Science and Technology, Policy, and Deputy Chief of Staff at the Department of Commerce. He also worked with former Governor Tim Kaine's former Governor Tim Kaine's Deputy Secretary of Commerce and Trade in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Before I turn over the stage to Rick Siger, just a note that we collected your questions on some index cards as you were checking in this morning, and we collected them as you were moving into the auditorium. So we will be, in an effort to save some time, I will be asking those questions on your behalf to Secretary Siger. There is a microphone here. If something comes up and you decided you want to jump in with another question that we didn't cover, and if time permits, you're welcome to do so. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Secretary Rick Siger.
I really appreciate you having me. All right. Thanks, Teresa. Thanks to the Chamber. Thanks to this great university, Delaware Valley University, for having us today. And thanks especially, it's really an honor to share a stage with so many distinguished senators and legislators and also county commissioners. I sort of really believe that economic development and community development is a team sport, right? It's a bipartisan effort. It's an effort that requires state and local government to be aligned. So I think that's really an important message to send here. So I'm Rick Siger, again, honored to be here, really honored to be in this job. I want to kind of do 4 things today, hopefully briefly, give you like a quick tour through what we've been working on, some of how we see the future of Pennsylvania economic development. And then what I'd really like to do is listen, hear your questions, interact a little bit via note card, but still interact. This is my second trip only to Bucks County since I've been in this role. I have a lot to learn. I'm from Pittsburgh, right? So I know the western part of the state pretty well, but this part of the state is a place I continue to come up to speed on. So let's start with like, where are we, right? Macroeconomic indicators. Let me just throw a couple of quick stats at you. Pennsylvania is the 19th largest economy in the world compared to independent nations, right? The size of Pennsylvania's economy is like a little smaller than Saudi Arabia. This is like a big, powerful economy across the state. And actually, at 3.5% unemployment right now, that is the lowest rate on record in Pennsylvania and actually matches the national rate. That's not to say there aren't challenges with labor participation and things like that. Interestingly, Bucks County's unemployment rate is only 2.7%. Our labor force is 6.5 million, and we have the highest number of non-farm jobs on record in the Commonwealth at 6.1 million. So there are some real positive indicators at the macro level, but what I'm going to talk about today is a real focus on kind of competitiveness, getting Pennsylvania back in the game in terms of growth and jobs. So before I do that, I think, it's only fair to sit, if I'm going to talk to you, to say a little something about what we've been up to in the Shapiro administration, not just in terms of core economic development activities, but kind of like what have we done in the last 8 months? And of course, we've done a lot of stuff, but I wanted to call out a few things that I think are actually quite important. We have stood up 2 huge new programs. One is a whole home repair program. This is a program where counties are granted money to repair blighted homes. We have stood up $200 million in broadband funding, to be followed by another $1.2 billion in federal broadband funding, with the express goal of connecting every single household, business, and location in the Commonwealth to high-speed internet. I've overseen the exit from Act 47, the State's Distressed Cities Program, or Distressed Municipalities Program, from a whole bunch of places. And maybe of most interest to this group, we've closed a whole bunch of deals. Oftentimes, I think people measure folks in my job fairly by the number of jobs they create, the kind of capital investment that's coming to the state. We've closed a whole bunch of really interesting deals here with a lot more to come. And I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. Let me also say that, when Governor Shapiro took office, he brought with him, I think, a lot of experience from being in local government and being in state government, but also a lot of input from real people and real businesses across the Commonwealth. And what he heard from folks is, the state is just kind of too slow, right? Permits happen too slow. There's a lack of certainty and predictability in the system, which businesses don't like. So literally, this picture is from, I think, the 3rd day on the job. So you can see me kind of in the shadows back there. It was my 3rd day. They were like, hey, can you go to this press conference and introduce Josh Shapiro, please? And I was like, sure. So I don't think I fell on my face. But the point is, like, right out of the gate, a focus on creating this new office called Office of Transformation and Opportunity, led by my colleague and good friend, Ben Kirshner, the guy on the right. This is all about bringing like a culture and speed of business to Pennsylvania. And let me give you like a very specific example of what Ben has been up to. We have launched a permitting review of all 2,400 permits, licenses, and certifications across Pennsylvania. There's 2,400 of them. Interestingly, most of them are at PennDOT and Department of Environmental Protection. And we have looked at every single one. We have looked at how long it takes. We have worked with external and internal stakeholders to say, here's how long it should take. And starting November 1st, if we don't process your permit or license or certification within that pre-described amount of time, we're going to give you your money back. It so happens that just the mere act of kind of opening up the hood and looking at these permits has created a whole bunch of efficiencies already. One really concrete example is when we came into office at the Department of State, if you wanted to do a business, start a business, like create an LLC, like a business filing, it could take up to 8 weeks. It currently takes 3 days. All right? Yeah. By the way, not rocket science, right? The reason for that is we added a bunch more people and we started paying some overtime, and it turns out you could fix it. I also want to just share one recent, I think, really interesting point of view that would be interesting, I think, to business owners here in particular. We've created a first of its kind in the nation program called the Commonwealth Workforce Training Program, or of course, we'll call it the CWP because governments love acronyms. This is actually, like, I think, a really creative way to leverage the massive amount of federal funding coming to the state to focus on workforce dollars. So we're going to take like a small cut of that money, we're going to sort of reinvest it into workforce training programs and make sure that we're addressing one of what I see as really a key risk of this massive increase in federal infrastructure and broadband and energy funding, which is like executability. We actually need the people to be able to dig the trenches and climb the high wires to lay that broadband fiber or to build those roads. And this is going to be a really important way that we do that. Let me talk, when I first signed up to do this, they said, hey, can you also talk a little bit about the budget? So, when Shapiro introduced his first budget, he was focused on, or our part of the budget, let's say, at Department of Community and Economic Development, was focused on these four things, right? We want to talk about growth, we want to talk about strengthening communities, empowering workers, and providing access to underserved businesses. So I want to talk about businesses, workers, and communities. For businesses, I'll highlight two investments that I think are really important. One is a $20 million investment, the first time ever that the Commonwealth has made these dollars permanent and state-funded in the historically disadvantaged business assistance program. If you look at the data, it's very clear that businesses started by folks from disadvantaged communities have less access to capital, less ability to close a loan. We want to help close that gap and level the playing field. And then an investment that I'm particularly fond of is $10 million increase to our Pennsylvania First program. This is my core deal closing fund. And if you benchmark the size of this fund against other states, it's really quite modest. I think that's a charitable way to say it. And so we have started to add new flexible cash to the pot so that when I'm sitting across the table from a company every day, I can say, hey, here's what Pennsylvania can do for you. We can invest alongside you to help grow jobs. In terms of workers, I'd highlight, I'm not going to read through every single one of these. I did want to highlight, though, this $3 million in pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship grant programs. Governor Shapiro, on his first week in office, also created an executive order that made it so 92% of state jobs don't require a college degree. I think we've got to be really focused on skills-based learning, and we know that apprenticeships are a model that can be really significant and important in that work. So we have $3 million in pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships. We're calling it Foundations in Industry. We need a name for everything, FIT. But this is really an opportunity for us to fund terrific apprenticeship programs in high-need areas. And then finally, communities. I do want to take a minute to talk about this because it is, after all, the Department of Community and Economic Development. And I think it's really hard to attract companies to Pennsylvania if workers for those companies don't have great places to live, frankly, like here in Bucks County. So two really proactive investments. The numbers are small, but I think the impact is big. One is the Municipal Assistance Program. This is a way to help municipalities, of which there are 2,560, by the way, in Pennsylvania, get smart on how they can offer services more efficiently and more effectively to their citizens. For example, we will fund, should there be local interest, a study to help combine police departments in sparsely populated municipalities. And then the one on the right, Strategic Management Planning Program, is really about helping these municipalities stay ahead of the curve financially, keep them out of Act 47, keep them financially strong. So excited about those. Okay, so that's budget. The last thing I want to talk about is the part where maybe you'll have the most questions, or I guess you asked your questions before the talk, but if people have questions, happy to do it, which is, it's been 18 years, almost 20 years since Pennsylvania sat down and said, here's what we want to be. Let's build a strategy for how we can grow our economy together. I've read that study. It came out in 2005. It was pretty good. But I think it's fair to say that the global economy has changed incredibly significantly since then. Right? In 2005, like, no one had an iPhone in their pocket, for example. So we have been in the process of, and I think the senators will tell you, who I met with like my first week on the job, we started talking about that. Coming up with a real plan for Pennsylvania's future. And I want to just share like why we're doing this. We want to win. We want Pennsylvania to compete. We want Pennsylvania to be among the very best states for business in the country. And we want to do this because we know that creation of jobs creates stronger communities, creates a higher quality of life for our citizens. And so we're looking at a bunch of different areas. I'd actually love to get your feedback on any of the above, including what sector should we focus on? I was talking to Lou, this is a big room, earlier. In Bucks County, there's a significant life science incubator. In Southeast Pennsylvania, we see a lot of power behind the life science industry, for example. We need to expand our innovation ecosystem broadly, not just from a sector perspective, but we need to make Pennsylvania a great place to grow and start companies, both high-growth companies and small businesses. We need to attract and retain talent. We know that, where I'm from, for example, in Pittsburgh, we have some of the greatest universities in the world. We import students to those universities, and many of them leave. We need to strengthen and support our diverse communities and regions, that should say. Pennsylvania is incredibly diverse. What will work in Bucks County probably won't work in Erie and vice versa, and we need to recognize that and tailor strategies accordingly. And then maybe the most boring, but what I'm the most excited about part of this is we need to build a better delivery model, right? I think the way that we do this work, the machinery from marketing to business development to deal flow, could be improved substantially. There are lots of states that do this well. We can learn a lot from them. We can add a lot of creativity and novel ideas and sort of customization in Pennsylvania and move that forward. We can't do this alone, and so it's going to take an inside game, right? Like we need to do transformation, and I need to work with my cabinet colleagues because, as I noted at the beginning, it's a team sport. We need to be engaging stakeholders across Pennsylvania. That's part of what I'm here to do today, is just sort of talk to you and say, we want your ideas. You know, tell us what's working and what's not. And then we're going to do, this says supporting innovation councils, which I should change, but really really intensive focus on engaging the private sector as customers. Like, what do companies operating here need? How can we help them succeed? So I tried to get through that pretty quick because actually what I'm more interested in, and this is a little selfish, is hearing from you about what's on your mind. What are key areas of focus here in Bucks County? What are pain points? What are strengths? So I welcome questions from the audience here and happy to answer them as wisely as I possibly can. So thanks so much. No questions? Should we just open it up?
Thank you, Julie. We didn't collect any cards. There weren't many that came in. Let me rephrase that. So since the secretary made his remarks, perhaps some things spurred a question, impromptu question. Why don't you feel free to come up, or I'll come to you and you can ask the secretary.
Good morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
My name's Christine Quimby, and I'm with Potential, a nonprofit here in southeastern Pennsylvania that provides services to individuals with autism throughout the lifespan. Our difficulty is with the workforce, trying to get the workforce participation and providing the high-quality training that's needed to really support the individuals and their families. And I know industry is also a big need, but is there anything going on at the state level regarding support for increasing the mental health workforce?
Thanks for the question. So I'll say something broad about workforce, and then I want to get back to you on like that really specific question about mental health workforce. The activities around that really are led by a different colleague of mine. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but like my overall point on workforce would be, it's the number one issue for almost every company we talk to, right? Like, I need skilled workers that can come help me succeed. And so as we think about the path forward, we've just got to be focused on not just having enough people, but having people with the right skills and empowering those people with opportunity to succeed in the career paths that they want. That's sort of why I was talking earlier about, I sort of glossed over it, but the importance of making sure that it's not all about just college degrees. Look, I worked at a university for many years. You know, many of the companies I've worked with and for are like very technology-forward companies, inventions that, you know, are unbelievable, and that's very important. But it's also true that if you talk to, for example, a robotics company in Pittsburgh, they need a bunch of PhD people from Carnegie Mellon. You know, they also need a bunch of people to like build and service these robots, right? And that skill set's very different, very specialized, not easy. I don't mean in a highly respected line of work, but different. And I think that that kind of approach to workforce is going to be important. But let me catch you afterwards, and I'll connect you with someone to answer the mental health question specifically.
Tom?
Thank you. I have a question that I know Biden has talked a little bit about it, and it's a selfish question to some extent. What's going on with adding like more EV charging stations within the state? Because traveling with an EV car, the biggest roadblock is finding good places to charge it and quick, fast charging.
Yeah, I'll give you, again, a high-level answer because I don't want to, I'm not super smart on this, but I do know that there was just an announcement made that the electric vehicle charging funding has been released, and I think like contracting and building for those stations is underway. It's going to take some time, but you know the federal government has invested substantially. The state's made some investments too, on the Turnpike in particular. I drive a Bolt, by the way, so I know the pain here, and it's difficult, especially in my line of work, you know, kind of traversing the state from side to side. You can't quite do it yet. I do think that infrastructure is going to start to come online in a much more significant way fast. And you've seen a bunch of private sector actors, like Sheetz, for example, that's built partnerships with, in that case, Electrify America, to build chargers in the western part of the state, including in rural areas, which selfishly has been terrific. And I think shows you that the market signal here is strengthening. So thanks for the question.
Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Dan McLaren. Thanks for coming today. A question about like the tax credits and for businesses and so forth. Like I've seen personal experience where companies have come in and said, we're going to bring so many X jobs into the community and we're going to get a tax abatement for 10 years and so forth, and failed to deliver. And the same owners have repeatedly had that practice. What's the outlook or a plan of attack so somebody doesn't abuse the system that way as you speak to that? And if there isn't any other questions, I have some questions about the education too, but I'll hold off. I don't want to be selfish.
Thanks. Great question. So the 10-year tax abatement is probably a local question, but like broader philosophical point would be if we are taking a hard look at our toolkit. We have 196 tools at the Department of Community and Economic Development on our books. In the last 2 years, 88 of them have been subscribed to, right? Or like people have applied for money from them. We're looking at every single one, starting with the 88. Does it work? Is it the right size? Are they changes that should be made to it? Should we have it at all? What are the gaps and what tools don't we have that other states have and other countries have to compete for business investment? And by the way, I should say, many of these tools are also community-facing tools, like facade grants and Main Street programs. We're looking at everything, right? A kind of ground-up look. One of the things that my conviction is growing on is a simpler tool set, right? How are you going to ask somebody to navigate 196 tools? Larger amounts of money in a smaller set of tools. And then third, to your direct point, accountability, right? We have very few tools. I mentioned the $10 million in Pennsylvania first on the slide. That tool, actually, we do claw back funding from for lack of performance. If we are going to partner with a company and invest in them with significant dollars, they're making a commitment to create jobs and make investments. I think if they don't do that, it's fair for us to say, you know, we're going to pay you for performance. We're not taking like all the money back, but there's a way for us to kind of gauge that. I think many state tools don't have that kind of accountability function built in, and I favor that, especially as we look at, you know, being much more aggressive financially and otherwise. So I think it's a good point. With the 10-year tax abatement question, that is almost definitely like a local LERTA or something like that. Yeah.
I'll ask another question, because you brought up about education, and if you're familiar with Bucks County, and especially in this school district, it's a very toxic environment. And I think education should be pretty much held down at the local level, but as you talk earlier about local, community, regional, and then state, kind of put that in my mind to where I don't even know if I have a question, more of a statement, and that is to plug the education piece together in this state with the current environment that we have at the local level that's fostered at the national level is something that I think that, you know, the state should maybe somehow look into to make sure that people are conducting themselves at the benefit of the citizens of our districts versus their own personal agenda. So it'd be interesting to know, like, as you guys were talking about education in Pennsylvania and retaining that, and so I was a little surprised to hear you say you're looking for less with college education, because maybe as a progressive, I think that anytime we have conversations about lowering our expectations, we're not moving forward progressively as a society. So just to hear that, that concerns me. I would like to share that with the group that, you know, somehow, I'd like to see some of our representatives get involved with some of these school districts we have in this area, because in the last 5 years, it's become really a plague on our society.
Look, I'm not sure it's appropriate for me to comment specifically on local education. So I just don't know enough about it. I'm not trying to get out of it. But with respect to the kind of lowering expectations, I want to push back pretty hard on that. I actually think, like, we want to empower people to chart their own path. And if your path is going to college, like, that is terrific. We should focus on affordability and preparation in high schools to get folks to college. As I mentioned, I worked in higher ed at an elite school, at like a top 20 school. And the importance of preparing students to be able to compete and succeed in that environment is critically important. But college is not for everybody, right? And so we don't want to sort of, and I think it's really important that we sort of respect and honor the importance of roles at all levels of, like, the capital stack, both associate's degrees and others. And we know that economically it's increasingly important, especially around Pennsylvania's strengths, for example, in manufacturing and hardware, even in life sciences, that these kind of technical level jobs, which, by the way, pay great wages in many cases, are sort of equally important to our economic success. So I think it's not devaluing somehow a college education. It's empowering Pennsylvanians to sort of chart their own path. And by the way, I should say this is also about, I think, reskilling and upskilling existing workers, right, who are maybe, have had a first career. The nature of their work is changing. We want to help them continue to succeed, earn that family-sustaining wage, be a productive contributor to the economy. So, thanks. Can someone ask me an easier question?
Hey, I got a good one. We're with Bucks County, the local tourism office, and knowing that tourism is under DCED.
Yeah.
We know Governor Shapiro, when he was with Montgomery County, very supportive of tourism marketing. Can you talk about the commitment that Shapiro administration has to telling people in New York and outside of Pennsylvania, this is a great place to come spend your money?
Yeah, great question, and definitely easier. Thank you.
Yes. Pennsylvania and in Bucks County specifically.
Yeah, that's good. Look, tourism is like a key part of the go forward here. There's no question. If you look at the data, I'm sorry it's not off the top of my head, but I think the year lags. I think it's like the 2021 numbers. It's something like $68 billion or something in direct and indirect spend in Pennsylvania in tourism. It's a huge opportunity for a bunch of reasons. Number one, it brings a lot of people here, and they spend money here, right? So the multiplier is significant, right? Like, you're driving through, you stop at a gas station, you sleep at a hotel, you're eating at a restaurant. Number two, we have amazing assets here, right? I have not actually, unfortunately, had the chance in this whirlwind 8 months to spend a lot of time in places like Bucks County doing tourism stuff. But, what's that? I'll call you, yeah. But, like, incredible assets, like people from all over the Eastern Seaboard coming here for, like, the charm and the beauty and the sort of, like, just drive 5 minutes away. Like, it's an incredibly beautiful place you all live in. It's also regionally really powerful tool, because there are many parts of Pennsylvania where there are only sort of a few bets that you can make, right? Like the Southeast, you have a bunch of strategic industries you could focus on. There are parts of the state where, like the Pennsylvania wilds in the very northern tier along the New York border, like, tourism is the strategy, and I really commend that, actually. They have incredible wildlands and ATVing and skiing and hiking, and they've created, like, a brand around it, and it's been really powerful, and it's starting to generate really significant economic activity. So I do think it's fun for me, and, I'm like the tech guy, like, let's talk about life sciences and robotics, but I agree with you, tourism's got to be a really important part of that equation.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for coming. My name is Brett Weber, and I serve as president of the Friends of the Delaware Canal, so we're a friends group to the state park. And I also serve as president and founder of the New Hope Colony Foundation for the Arts. And as a follow-up to your questions about tourism, I guess I just wanted to ask you to frame your comments about how you leverage what I also agree are great assets of the state. We have this incredible outdoor economy, which DCNR does a great job promoting and talking to constituents across the Commonwealth about, but it's a really important and valuable point that needs to keep getting hammered home at every opportunity. But it's also a huge draw for employers, I think. I think the feedback that I hear, I'm an architect, that's my day job, so you know, hearing that directly. I'm just curious how the Shapiro administration is stepping forward to kind of leverage those things. Also, you know, this cultural tourism, which is driven around, you know, some of the nation's best museums, arts institutions, performing arts centers. That story has to keep, you know, getting put out there. I'm sure you're doing that, but you know, there's a lot of that that's here in Bucks County. So just any further comments you want to offer to that? Thank you.
Yeah, really glad you asked. I'll take this kind of two separate questions. So on the sort of outdoor rec part, I'm really glad you asked. Last week, or possibly 2 weeks ago, it's hard for me to keep track of time right now, Governor Shapiro announced with me and Cindy Dunn, the Secretary of DCNR, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, the first ever Pennsylvania Office of Outdoor Recreation. It's going to be based in DCNR with like a heavy focus from our tourism folks and kind of like some matrix marketing capabilities in my shop. And we are the 19th state to create such an office, but the largest state to do so. And I think Pennsylvania is a little bit like of an undersold asset when it comes to outdoor stuff. I agree with you. I like, in just my personal time, I love being outside, like avid hiker and boater, and Pennsylvania is quite amazing, actually. I think we have told that story reasonably effectively, but I see it as like a core pillar of our go forward in terms of tourism marketing. And again, with respect to Bucks, I have a lot more to learn about specific assets here, so I don't want to say like the wrong thing. I do think there's no question that the linkage between like tourism assets we would develop and market and the importance of attracting and retaining workforce here. Both the remote workforce, like a lot of people can just kind of work from anywhere. Maybe they want to come home, maybe they want to live in a place like Bucks County because they have access to certain amenities or their families from here or something like this. And for employees we're trying to attract here, right? Companies want to work where they can attract great workforces. To do that, they have to be in great communities. They have to have access to great amenities, right? These are kind of like the same thing. Two sides or multiple sides of the same multi-sided coin. That kind of fell apart there, but you take my point. With respect to your second question, can you just say one more time, what was like the second part of your question? I think you answered it. Okay. I think that I'm just interested to hear your responses actually from the companies. Oh yeah. We see it nationally where regions are promoting or states are promoting the assets that they have, and it's a considerable change maker, decision maker, location. Yeah. Totally agree. Again, I'll stick by the point I made earlier, which is the most common #1 driver for companies. Sometimes it's like power or like the nature of a site, but almost always it's about workforce, right? And that is directly related to, do people want to live in, raise a family in, you know, build a life in a place where this company wants to locate? So yeah, it's extremely important. It's outdoor rec assets. It's also, you know, education system. It's transportation, it's access to, you know, all sorts of cultural amenities. That was the part of your question I forgot. You know, cultural amenities like museums, absolutely it's relevant as we market. And I think you see like the Philly Chamber or the Pittsburgh, you know, the Allegheny Conference in Pittsburgh, like they lead a lot of their marketing because of the research that shows with those kind of quality of life issues. It's also, by the way, a way for us and regions within Pennsylvania to market, you know, for residents and businesses at the same time. Like people want to live in a place, companies want to locate in a place, you can develop a kind of flywheel effect.
Secretary Siger, we have one final question.
Great.
Mr. Secretary, Jim Brexler with Doylestown Health. We met earlier. Thank you for being here. I want to circle back around to workforce for a second and the comment about education. I was intrigued by the innovation fund that you have. I think one of the issues, because I agree completely, it's training across the entire spectrum. It's not just college grads or postgraduate, it's also across the spectrum. Institutions like ours are interested in partnering with the academic institutions to create more expanded training opportunities, but funding for that is sometimes difficult to find, and you have to sort of go out of the box, not just through the school or have the institution fund it, but to have joint ventures and innovative programs. And we're very interested in that. I wonder if you could comment, is the Innovation Fund or is the state thinking about funding creative programs that would expand the training capability, opportunities for folks? because we are desperate to get a trained workforce in today?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Let me answer that in a general way with a possible follow-up as we continue to, the strategy continues to materialize with something like a little more specifically. There's no question that one of the most significant resources the state has across the whole state is our R&D powerhouse, like the way that we kind of do innovation here. But many studies over many years, including one from Brookings just last year, shows us that we are not producing the amount of kind of commercial activity that we should be, even benchmarked just to our population, based on this research output, right? So this is something we really want to attack vigorously and say like, hey, why is that not happening? Can the state play a role, not just as like a funder or to run programs, but as a convener of stakeholders, right? Like workers and companies and foundations and nonprofits and kind of innovation ecosystem players to help solve some of those problems. So I think we do want to look at a suite of investments. And by the way, the state makes a bunch of investments in this area already through like the Ben Franklin Technology Partners and other places. So it's not like we do nothing. But I do think as part of this look that we're taking, we're looking at a bunch of investments, both in terms of sector-specific domains like life sciences, just to stick with the theme here, but also in kind of like what I think of as enablers, like a set of things that are really important that enable a certain sector to succeed. And that would include things like workforce training, infrastructure, the toolkit, tax policy, right? This is like the conditions in which a company is competing. So I do think those kinds of workforce investments focused on innovation are very much on the radar. I also would just say, as a related point, let's just talk a little bit about this, or we should just put your people in touch with our workforce people. Because though the rules are sometimes a little tricky, there is actually like a lot of funding, especially through labor and industry, my colleague's department, like a huge amount of federal funding that's focused on workforce. And they've been able to have success after kind of a detailed sit down, like matching some of that funding against a problem you're trying to solve. So I wouldn't necessarily even say, without knowing about it, like we need something new, but let's kind of sit down or have our people sit down and try to see if they could troubleshoot and identify some funding there. And I think that's it. All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Secretary Siger. That was awesome. Everyone. So before we proceed with our distinguished panelists, I'd like to invite our two final sponsors to say a few words. Please join me in welcoming Blair Rush, Southeast Region President at CNN Bank.
Good morning. We're really excited to be a sponsor of this event. We have a great relationship with the Central Bucks Chamber of Commerce, a great relationship with Delaware Valley University, and we consider ourselves a major player in the banking industry and the economic development throughout the state of Pennsylvania. CNN Bank is located in Tioga County, Wellsboro, Tioga County, and then CNN purchased Covenant Bank, where I was president, and Monument Bank in 2020 and 2019 to get into the southeast part of the state. And we talk about economic development. And up in Tioga County, there's a lot of hiking and a lot of mountains and all those kind of neat things. Bucks County in the southeast part of the state, there's a lot of activity of businesses and people. So I served on the PA Bankers Board for several years, and we consider banking to be critical in the economic development of our communities, and CNN Bank is a community bank. We believe in giving back to the communities where we work and where we live, and sponsorships is part of that, and the Chamber is certainly a great source of opportunity, and we'd love to support the chamber. C&M, we're a commercial bank. We have full services of business banking, consumer banking, wealth management, cash management, treasury services, and residential mortgages. And we have a number of teammates here today. We have 14 commercial lenders in this area. There's 28 commercial lenders in the entire company, and it goes to show the opportunities in Southeast Pennsylvania if half the lenders are in this group. So we would love to have an opportunity to talk with you if you have a financial need. We're a relationship-based bank, and we believe in relationships to get business done, and we're excited to always support the Chamber of Commerce and this event. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, Blair. Oh, sorry. Thank goodness we don't need this anymore. Lastly, and certainly not least, please welcome Brian Jetter, Senior Director of Government and Regulatory Affairs for Comcast.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you've had enough Java. Your Eagles hangover is subsided. We had great weather this morning. It's a pleasure to be here again at Del Val. It's great to see so many familiar faces from Bucks County and beyond. On behalf of Comcast, a long-time relationship and partnership with the Chamber and Teresa and the staff. A special thanks to the Secretary for being here. Welcome to Bucks County, and we hope that you'll visit us soon and often. To our state delegation, a great group of men and women representing Bucks County well in Harrisburg, and to our county commissioners doing such a great job every single day here locally. We thank them. And then lastly, our commitment to Bucks County has never wavered. For the 30-plus years we've been here, we employ hundreds of folks, technicians, and the like that hopefully don't have to visit your home or your business too often, given our network reliability and the like. So we have a variety of tech facilities here in Bucks County. We continue to operate those facilities and have great men and women in our workforce. We have Xfinity stores throughout our footprint, and particularly 3 in Bucks County that we're proud of. Our region headquarters is in Trevose. Many of you don't know that, but that serves all of Southeast PA, the city of Philadelphia, all of New Jersey, and a sliver of Delaware. So lastly, before I turn it over and we hear our distinguished guests and legislators and getting an update on what they're all working on, one thing that the Secretary mentioned that I think is critical, may not be overly relevant to Bucks County, but certainly throughout the Commonwealth, is the bucket of federal funds through the Broadband Authority, not only for broadband expansion, but equally as important as we talk about workforce in Bucks County and beyond, is digital literacy skills and digital navigation. The digital navigation piece is something of a new buzzword that's out there, but it's critically important to develop our workforce, particularly for those not only within the Comcast family of companies, but those outside. We need more digital literacy in our communities for our those that are not going to college. There are so many jobs, not only in Bucks County, but outside of the county, that require new digital skills, including many of which at work here at Comcast. So just think about it in your jobs and your workforce conversations. Certainly in the nonprofit sector, we have quite a number of great nonprofits represented this morning here. You know, think about digital literacy and what it may mean to your organization. There are a second bucket of funds that are coming out sometime in 2024, and programs that are soon to be developed around digital literacy and digital navigation. I think of my dad in Florida who thinks he fancies himself as an iPhone user, but you know, he has to talk to his doctor now using a digital navigation tool, and he's unable to do so, and he's looking for programs in Florida for that purpose, and that's something I think the Commonwealth is serious about. The Broadband Authority and DC is serious about, and you'll hear more about it in the coming, certainly in the coming months, if not and beyond. So again, we thank Teresa and the staff at the Chamber. We love our partnership with them, and enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And we're so pleased to have all of you with us here today and your unwavering support of the Chamber. So it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Alex Halper. Alex is the Vice President of Government Affairs for the PA Chamber of Business and Industry and our moderator for the next portion of our event. Alex oversees public policy development, advocacy, and outreach, as well as the organization's political efforts. He specifically focuses on labor and employment, education, and workforce policy. Alex serves on various government relation boards and was appointed to Governor Josh Shapiro's Transition Advisory Committee. He regularly speaks to local chambers of commerce, trade associations, and employers across the Commonwealth about key legislative issues impacting businesses and Pennsylvania's overall political landscape. Alex, would you please join me on the stage?
Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you on a beautiful morning, and yes, go Birds. Good win last night. So I have the real privilege this morning to serve as moderator for your local legislative delegation. So in a minute, I'm going to introduce the members of the delegation and ask them to come up. Teresa asked me first to give a little bit of background on the PA Chamber. And I'd like to also talk a little bit about the Chamber family. I loved how Drew put that. So the PA Chamber is the statewide Chamber of Commerce. We have about 10,000 members throughout the Commonwealth, businesses of all sizes, crossing all industry sectors in all 67 counties from Wellsboro to Bucks County and everywhere in between. Our mission at the PA Chamber is simple. We want Pennsylvania to be the best state in the country to do business, where our Pennsylvania employers want to expand and we can attract other businesses here. When I think about our 10,000 members and them serving as partners with us on that mission, I truly believe, pound for pound, the most effective advocates for that mission are local chambers of commerce, regional chambers of commerce, including your outstanding chamber here in Central Bucks County. So the PA Chamber was founded, just a quick little history story. The PA Chamber was founded in 1916. A couple years later, the very small staff of this new organization hired a new member of the staff whose job was going to be to travel around Pennsylvania, meet with businesses, meet with communities. His name was Daniel Casey. I don't think he's any relation to the Pennsylvania Caseys, but that was his job. And when I was kind of reading about Daniel Casey, I guess my assumption originally was that his job would be to go out around Pennsylvania and recruit businesses to join this new statewide business trade association. Reading articles, however, in fact, what his job was to travel around the state and meet with community leaders and business leaders and encourage those businesses to form local chambers of commerce. And he met a lot with local chambers that already existed and talked about the importance of advocacy and supporting your local chamber and making sure to, pay your dues on time and keep on funding these important institutions. So I realized that from our very earliest days as an organization, we recognized how critical the partnership is within this broader chamber family. So it's a real, it's been wonderful working with Teresa and just really appreciate the invitation to be part of a really outstanding program today. Really appreciate the presentation and remarks from Secretary Siger. I can say that the Secretary, upon coming into that position, really did clearly demonstrate his commitment to an inclusive process of developing policy and programs and making sure the business community was at the table, so I do appreciate that. Okay, so getting into our program. So I'm going to introduce members of the delegation brief intros individually, and when I do that, if you want to come up and take your spot on the stage, and you can either look around or take a best guess of where your nameplate is. So then we're going to get into a number of questions that have been submitted, and every member of the delegation will have an opportunity to answer the question, and we'll go from there. So I'd first like to introduce State Senator Frank Farry. If you want to come on up, Senator. Senator Farry represents the 6th District, which includes Middletown, Northampton, Warwick Townships. He was first elected last year and had previously served 7 terms in the State House, former local elected official, and as well as a fire chief in his community, and continues to serve in that capacity today. I would next like to introduce Senator Steve Santarsiero. Senator serves the 10th Senate District, which includes New Britain Township, Doylestown, and Buckingham. Also an alumnus of the State House, served for 4 terms. Yeah, this is a fun game we have you all play. Serving 4 terms in the State House. Previously also worked in the Attorney General's office, in local politics, and also as a teacher at Bensalem High School. Proceeding from here, I think we're just in alphabetical order. So I'd like to call up State Representative Tim Brennan. Thank you. Representative Brennan represents Buckingham, Doylestown, and Salisbury Townships, an attorney by trade, and also former member of the Doylestown Borough Council. I'd like to introduce Representative Shelby Labs. Representative Labs was first elected not 2022, that's wrong, in 2020. First elected in 2020, represents the 143rd District, which includes Bedminster, Plumstead, which I think is her hometown, and Hilltown. I'd be remiss if I didn't give Representative Labs a quick shout out. She's the sponsor of legislation related to unemployment compensation and workforce. So kudos to Representative Labs on that. I know some crowds, when I just say unemployment compensation, I see eyes starting to twitch, because it's been a challenging program over the last few years, but thank you to Representative Labs for her leadership there. Next, Representative Brian Munroe. Representative Munroe was first elected last year to the 144th House District, which includes New Britain, Warminster, Warrington, served his community as a police officer, as well as on the Warminster Township Board of Supervisors, and as clerk of courts for Bucks County. And finally, State Representative Perry Warren. Representative Warren, first elected in 2016 to serve the 31st House District, includes a number of communities, Lower Makefield, Newtown, served on Newtown Borough Council previously, and an attorney by trade. So thank you all, legislators, for being here today and being accessible and partners with your local business community. So start with an easy question in honor of Secretary Siger, who didn't get too many easy questions, but really just want to go down the line. Any parts of your bio, since I was asked to keep those brief, but any parts of your background or bio that you would like to highlight, as well as your kind of top priority, what are you particularly focusing on at this moment in this relatively new session of the state legislature? We will start with Senator Farry.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. I'm going to touch on a couple things real quick that I don't think are often thought about at the state level, but do impact all of our lives, both in terms of our careers and where we live. One is I'm the chair of the Urban Affairs and Housing Committee in the Senate, and the term affordable housing has a bad stigma to it. People think the old school projects, if you will. The term that's now evolving is workforce housing. And I think any of us that live in Bucks County realize the price of housing is very challenging. Interest rates are obviously very high right now, which adds to that problem. But to our young workforce, or to our workforce that work in lower paying jobs, they're struggling to find housing here in the community, and that adds to the workforce problem. So one thing I'll impart on you is, as you hear the term affordable housing potentially being developed in a township or borough, take a good look at what they're really trying to do. NIMBYs, sometimes not in my backyard, folks, have really blown up some of these opportunities to have housing in our communities. We had the question earlier about employees in the mental health sector, right? They're not highly compensated folks. Our DSPs are not highly compensated folks that work in our nursing homes and care for our individuals with disabilities. And a lot of them are commuting using SEPTA coming up from Philadelphia. But I think it's important that we work towards integrating housing into our county that people can afford. So that's one component, and as chair of this committee, it's something that I'm working on. Second is our first responders. I've been a volunteer firefighter for 33 years, fire chief of my community for 22. There is a significant crisis with our volunteer fire service and with our EMS providers who are primarily career. And what people don't think about is, as we go the way of the dinosaur, and unfortunately the volunteer fire service is heading in that direction, your property taxes are going to increase significantly. Your municipalities, under state law, are required to provide EMS and fire protection. Middletown Township did a study a couple years ago, and the consultant reported that when the volunteer fire service goes away, Middletown's going to have to increase their budget by $5 to $7 million. That is going to be a significant property tax increase. And again, that also affects the affordability of a community too. So anything you can do to help support your first responder community is important. We're working with the county and some of the local governments to help develop that workforce. And I will tell you, more and more communities are going towards career fire service. The average cost of a paid firefighter to a municipality is about $116,000 here in Bucks County. So as you build out that workforce, their budget becomes substantially more expensive. So I just want to bring light to that, because as the secretary talked about, our communities and our municipalities in terms of their welfare fall under his department. It's important that we continue to work to support our fire and EMS providers. We've passed a lot of laws at the state level to help with the recruitment and retention of fire and EMS providers. There's still some more work to be done at the state level, but we're really dependent on the support at a local level.
Senator Santarsiero, top priority, and any key points from your bio that we missed?
No, I'll skip the bio piece. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Dr. Ben and Del Val for hosting today. It's an honor of mine to have Del Val in the 10th District that I represent in the State Senate. Obviously, I want to thank the Chamber for putting this together, my colleagues and all of you for being here today for this informative discussion, and of course, Secretary Siger for taking the time out of his very busy schedule and all the things that he has across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to spend the morning with us here in Bucks County. Senator Farry and I were recently at the Lower Bucks Chamber luncheon in Bensalem about a month ago, a little month and a half ago or so. And I want to touch on something I talked about then, because I think it has the most impact ultimately to our business community. And that is something that we always start off with in the state legislature when we start the budget process on an annual basis. We go through a report from the IFO about our demographics here in PA. We are becoming an older state. Every year, those statistics become more and more pronounced. And I put that out there because as we become older, it limits the size of our workforce, which in turn limits potential future economic growth. And that should be a concern for each and every one of us in this room, and that should be a concern for everyone across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so I think one of the biggest challenges we have is wrapping our arms around that problem and enacting policy that will start to reverse that problem. Senator Farry just talked about one issue that I think is relevant to that, and that's affordable housing. If we are going to attract more young people to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and keep the young people that we have here now, we obviously have to have good, affordable housing available to them. You ask most people in their 20s and early 30s whether that's the case now, and the answer is absolutely not. So we have to do a better job on that front, certainly. We also have to provide more economic opportunity. Reducing the corporate net income tax rate was obviously important in that regard to make us more competitive with other states. But we also have to make smart investments in those sectors where we can be competitive. And I know I've spoken to Secretary Siger about it. He has this experience with Carnegie Mellon. But AI in places like the Allegheny County area, he touched on it in his remarks. We're very fortunate in the life sciences sector to have a biotech incubator just down the road in Buckingham Township. I see Lou Casa here today. It's good to see you, Lou. Secretary Siger and the governor came out earlier this year to have a firsthand look at the biotech center. It does tremendous work in spinning off companies, incubating companies, and employing people at good-paying wages. And not only that, it does a great job of partnering with our local schools to get young people who are taking AP chemistry courses to come in and work with the scientists on the work that they're doing. And I see my former colleague, former Representative Marguerite Quinn, who knows well about that too, because when in her time representing the 143rd District, she was very involved at the Biotech Center as well. We have, of course, as Jim Brexler was noted before, a very important and dynamic healthcare scene here in Bucks County, and with the Doylestown Health, an epicenter of that for us. Those are the types of jobs we need to be focusing on, and training, certainly, as Jim noted, is an important part of that. But we need to be strategic with those investments, and I know Governor Shapiro has spoken about that. We need to ultimately emulate what states like Massachusetts did with the Mass Bio program, where over a 10-year period, they invested $1 billion, $100 million a year into biotechnology, into the Biotechnology Center. And that made them a leader. And we need to be there too here in Pennsylvania. So those strategic investments, critically important. Obviously, education, I can tell you as a former educator myself, how important it is that we support our schools and we support job training, whether it's going into the higher education route for kids, or whether it's training, whether it's workforce development, which includes, of course, the great apprenticeship programs that our building trades in the Philadelphia region have. There are so many things that we need to be investing in, but it's important that we work strategically to reverse that overall trend, because that will be a limiter in our economic growth down the road if we don't start to tackle it now. So I look forward to the rest of the discussion this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Brennan.
Yes. First I want to thank the Chamber and our sponsors here today for putting this event on. This is really what good corporate citizenship looks like, having events like this to talk to your representatives and to get your opinions, and for us to hear that as well. So I think that's incredibly important. My background is really at the intersection of both public and private. I grew up in a small business. I worked in my parents' restaurant pretty much through law school, became a lawyer and also a solicitor. As a private attorney, I worked with businesses day in and day out, and as a solicitor, I worked on every type of issue that can come up in local government, from DEP issues with tank closures and dealing with those issues, and also creative financing plans like TIFs and other financing plans when you have these problematic development needs where government does need to step in and provide incentives. I'm a first-generation college student. I've started, I owned my first property probably in my 20s, fixed it up myself and sort of did my own thing, worked on my parents as well, did my own first land development plan, in my 30s, having to deal with flagger force and hop permits and actually doing some of those things that the business community has to deal with and experience some of the challenges that the business community has to deal with. Small business owner myself. I was a council person in Doylestown for 7 years. I worked on a bunch of different issues. I was on zoning and planning, so I saw all the issues that came up day in and day out with development. Also the Broad Street project, regionalizing our police force, which were all great experiences. And now I'm a state representative. I'm on the Appropriations Committee. I got a very good seat to see the budget forming this year. State government, insurance, tourism, and the ethics committees. You know, getting here, I've been in office for 8 months, and I'm sort of starting to see, having represented Doylestown for several years, I saw the micro issues, and you know, in the first 8 months, I'm starting to see some of the macro issues, and you know, I have to parrot my concerns about affordable housing. I think it's affecting our infrastructure as well. One of the first things that I saw coming into office is that we have something like a 60% capacity right now with PennDOT maintenance, and it's the same thing with DCNR. You know, Bucks County is a county that's putting a lot into the state, and we're having a hard time getting the same state services because it's expensive to live here. So if we're going to have the canal in the condition that it should, if we're going to have our roads in the conditions that it should, we have to figure out how to make it affordable for rank and file workers to be here working on the roads. I think the Biotech Center's been a great partner. It's an economic engine here right in the center of my district and creating jobs. And one of the things I think in this budget that I've wrapped my arms around the most, that I'm most interested in, is this new Office of Outdoor Recreation that the Secretary had brought up. I think this provides so many opportunities for this area. There's something like $1 billion just in recreation on the Delaware River. We have a natural resource that we can also use as an economic driver, and I'm looking forward to that. You see a number of the different projects that are incorporating environmental elements, like the Font Hill project will be including some environmental elements. So it's a really interesting office and development for Bucks County. So I'm looking forward to serving all of you.
Thank you. Representative Labs, some opening comments.
Thank you, and thank you to the Chamber and the university for hosting us today. The first thing I'll say, and something that I'm very passionate about, is our veteran community. As some of you know, my husband is a veteran, and just seeing firsthand the struggles and the difficulties and hurdles as they transition to civilian life. As we talk about, you know, our workforce shortage and things of that nature, I think it's really important that we tap into this community of hardworking men and women that are willing and able to work and just maybe need some direction. I know a lot of our partners, Comcast being one, has excellent veteran programs and workforce and training. So I think that that's so important that we're looking at that and making sure that our veteran community is accounted for and taken care of and supported. The second thing, I am one of the chairs of the bipartisan, bicameral Early Childhood Education Caucus. Obviously, as you can see, something I'm very passionate about. As a new and expectant mother, I think focusing on the early childhood education component is so important, and really looking at it through the economic lens as well. You know, it's vital that we're looking at the way that we educate our kids early, you know, looking at them as the next generation of our workers, but also on the economic side of it, the more kids that we can get off of these wait lists that I know I am on, the more parents we can get back to work, get back, you know, into the economy and growing it that way. So very passionate about that. We're working a lot on that in Harrisburg. And I do think it's a collaborative approach. I think we need to talk to our stakeholders and figure out, how do we do this and how do we, make this work for everybody. So I thank you for having me.
Thank you. Representative Munroe.
Thank you, and good morning. It's all about relationships. When I was a police officer back in the day, one of the first indicators that I knew that that there was a true issue within our community, this was when I was in Radnor Township in Delaware County, was talking to the business leaders, not just the coffee shop owners, but talking to a lot of individuals that were having difficulties sustaining their businesses because the people that were coming in the door had their credit cards bouncing. It was a very early indicator that there was an issue. So now that I'm a state representative, and those relationships are extremely important, those relationships have allowed me to identify several issues within my own community that are kind of an indicator that there's an issue that needs to be dealt with. We all know that we went through a post-COVID inflation bump, and that pain is extremely real in my community. We've got food banks, and you speak to the individuals that run those food banks, the demand for the food items has never been greater. The amount of thousands, I think he told me 30,000 pounds of food a month. And I'm looking forward to there's some grant opportunities that we have coming in for those food banks, especially through our school district. But there's a clear indicator there that people don't have the sustainable income, the spending income that every single one of us, especially if you're a business owner, needs, because people, when they spend money, they come to your business and they spend that money. So, like I said, there's a clear indicator that the hangover from the inflation issue is still very much an issue. I'm happy that the representative spoke about child care. That's another relationship that I developed as a state representative, is learning about the massive void of qualified workers. If parents need to get into the workforce, they need someone to watch their children. And that's, I think you go to any child care facility within Bucks County and you're going to hear the exact same thing for every school. My one local elementary school, pre-K school, I should say, is Elbow Lane. And they indicated to me for the first time in their history that they have like a 50% vacancy. And it's not a vacancy because, they don't have people lining up at the door. They have people lining up at the door. They just don't have teachers and qualified workers in their school to be able to teach them and watch them. And thirdly, back on the inflation issue, people with fixed incomes in my community. I've got a pretty significant size senior citizen community, and many of those people are on fixed incomes. So with the rise of inflation, typically, and economic experts can correct me if I'm wrong, typically you see a rise of income to kind of offset that. But you're not going to get that with people that are on fixed incomes, especially senior citizens, right? Because they're living off of their pensions or their 401ks, et cetera. So their spending income, the amount of money that they have to go out to restaurants, to go out to your businesses, has dried up. So that's a real issue that I'm looking to tackle. I do have a few ideas on that front. And I think those are probably, through the relationships that I have in my community, are the three biggest issues facing us from an economic standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Warren.
Thank you. Thank you. So in addition to being an attorney, I started with a partner, a law firm in 1998 that ultimately grew to 10 lawyers. I also owned an ice cream truck business for over 30 years. And I was a member of and served as an officer of the Young Entrepreneurs Organization of New Jersey. And accordingly, my committee assignments in the House have reflected that business background. I'm currently Secretary of the House Commerce Committee, Vice Chair of the House Insurance Committee, and also serve on the Transportation and Judiciary Committees. And as business owners and business leaders, I would encourage you to reach out, Brian and Florence and any other folks here who may live in the communities that I represent, to me or to Senator Santarsiero, with whom my district overlaps, or to your representative or senator, if you have ideas for legislation, because that's where a lot of the legislative ideas come from, particularly in the business realm. And as two examples, I got an email earlier this year from a lawyer in Philadelphia who had noticed that Title 15, which is the corporate law statute, which we on the Commerce Committee amended last year through a bill that passed in the House and Senate, was signed into law. He noticed that there was a fairly esoteric provision that was that seemed to be erroneous or at least ambiguous. It had to do with shareholder derivative lawsuits, and he sent it to me, and I looked at the statute and seemed to agree with him, and we sent it to the Pennsylvania Bar Association, which also vetted the statute and some alternative language, and we'll be introducing that legislation through the Commerce Committee this year that corrects that or addresses that seeming error or omission in Title 15. And similarly, 3 years ago, the solicitor of Lower Makefield Township, which was a dry town, reached out to me and to Senator Santarsiero about some ambiguity in the statute that provided for a referendum on whether to allow liquor sales within a community. And the solicitor said, it's not entirely clear, and we don't want to go through the process of having a referendum, incurring the cost, and then having the result of the referendum ultimately thrown out because we didn't do it right. And the senator and I both worked on language that without taking, at least on my part, without taking a position with respect to the outcome of any referendum, what I wanted to do was make sure it was done right. And we amended the language through what ultimately became Act 21 of 2020 to clarify the process for holding a referendum on liquor issues within a municipality. So both of those concepts, though, came from, well, from lawyers, but also with people with a business interest. And I encourage you, as I said, to all reach out to us when you see legislation or you see something that needs to be addressed or needs to be fixed. And I and all of my colleagues, I think, would be very happy to work with you and appreciate the suggestion. And I look forward to hearing what you all have to say today. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Can I just add something? As a resident of Lower Makefield, I was unapologetically in favor of undoing the dry town status of Lower Makefield.
Thank you, Senator. Well, let's get into some of these questions. We probably have more questions than we have time to answer, but we'll get through as many as possible. None of these questions were directed to any particular member of the delegation, so I'll go down the list. If your answer was already taken or you don't have any comment, feel free to wave off. But let's get into it. So it's it's a business group, so maybe we'll ask the first question about tax policy. And Senator Santarsiero referenced the tax legislation that passed last session to lower what had been the second highest corporate rate in the country, included some important small business tax reforms, and that was passed with very strong bipartisan support, including by every member of the delegation who was in the legislature at the time. So references that legislation, and it's sort of a two-part question, and you can choose either of the two questions to answer. Number one, what's next for business tax reform in the legislature? And second, how can the legislature duplicate this kind of bipartisan cooperation on significant public policy? So maybe we'll start at the end with Representative Brennan.
Yeah. So I think the governor's budget in terms of tax policy has taken some efforts for targeted tax incentives. I always think that targeted tax incentives are some of the better ways to go about it to sort of encourage a positive policy with an economic benefit. In this case, the governor had proposed $2,500 tax credits for certain occupations that we have a problem with in the market. I think that's the kind of thing that could be replicated in other areas if one side of the aisle might see a social benefit or an economic benefit and using tax policy to get there. I think that's always a sensible thing to do. So yeah, I mean that's some of the things I could see going forward. And in terms of actually talking, having a dialogue, I think that's something that we're here to do, and I maybe that could be improved, but that's where I see tax policy in terms of what I'd like to see, and some of what I'm seeing in the budget now.
Thank you, Senator Santarsiero.
Sure. Thank you. Well, I do think there will be discussion and I think bipartisan support around the idea of reducing the CNI even further. Again, it's something that has enjoyed bipartisan support, largely because I think there's been general understanding that it will make us more competitive vis-a-vis other states. I think, too, we should be looking at a thorough analysis of all of our tax abatement zones throughout Pennsylvania. We have one right here in Bucks County, and a large one, obviously, at the old U.S. Steel site, where a company called North Point is now developing a large distribution center for the region. It's an ideally located site for that. But I think you have to look at those types of arrangements and where they can be most effective elsewhere in the state, particularly in areas of the state that have had some economic dislocation as a consequence of the changing of the economy over the last 30 or 40 years. So I think those types of things could garner bipartisan support because I think they're not ideological in any way. It's more of a focus on how we can effectively use tax policy to incentivize economic growth and smart growth that, as I said earlier, will help us reverse that demographic trend here in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Representative Labs.
So I'll just add a second component to that. Along with the tax policy, I really think it's important to look at these regulations. And as the Secretary stated in his presentation, I feel like the business community is really front and center right now in a lot of things that we're doing. So, looking at the regulatory reforms and this red tape, I think ultimately we want to attract and retain businesses in Pennsylvania, but also help them thrive, not just bring them here and say, okay, now jump through all these hoops. So I think, along with the tax policy, it's really important to look at these, regulatory reforms that we can make as a comprehensive plan to really ultimately help businesses thrive in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Representative Warren.
So first, I agree with my colleagues that we need to continue to take a look at the corporate income tax to make sure that we are competitive with other states, and particularly neighboring states. And I was appointed several years ago to work on the real property tax work group. And we need to continue to work on the challenge of funding our schools and looking for income sources other than or in addition to the real property tax. And with the court's decision that the funding of our schools is unconstitutional, I think that will be a major tenet of the remainder of this term and probably the next, and Governor Shapiro's term in office, in continuing to work on appropriately funding our schools in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator.
Yeah, as the Secretary mentioned during his presentation about the look on licensing and permitting and regulations, that reform certainly needs to be front and center, and I'm glad the governor is leading on that. Alex and I were on a panel last week in Philadelphia where you literally had the building trades, the business industry, Buckley Construction, which are the ones that rebuilt the 95, where the 95 fire was. And we talked a lot about permitting and regulatory reform. And there's this story about a company that was going to build in western Pennsylvania, and they were tied up in the permitting process, and they went to Arkansas. And the Arkansas state official said that that business will be built and operating in Arkansas before that company would have ever been able to get a permit in Pennsylvania. And that's a problem. We saw during COVID how many regulations got suspended immediately. We've reformed some of those regulations during that time, but we need to look on ways of streamlining things. Many of your businesses require some sort of licensure, whether it's the employee or to operate your business. And we need to ensure that you're not tied up with red tape, as Representative Labs said, and you can conduct your business efficiently while still operating safely. And one other thing I want to point out, if you have an employee that's waiting on a license, please contact our offices. Every year I have a school district that contacts us, and they have a stack of teachers that are waiting for their certifications before they can start teaching in that school year. And when we make some phone calls, it truly does end up in a different pile. If you have one of your coworkers who's talking about their spouse lost their job and they're struggling with the unemployment system, call our offices. That's part of what our staffs do, is cut through that red tape, and that's one of the best ways we can be helpful to you.
Thank you. Representative.
Thank you very much. The one thing I want to just draw attention to is something actually Senator Farry passed in the Senate, and I have a piece of legislation in the House of Representatives to tackle the Sterling Act. So we're sitting in here, we talk about taxes, we talk about our tax base, we talk about funding police officers and things of that nature. But what we don't talk about is the millions of dollars that are being taken from our communities and are being kept in Philadelphia on a monthly basis. So what is the Sterling Act? So the Sterling Act, if everybody knows, if you work, even if you live here but you work in Philadelphia, they take about a 4.25% wage tax. In Bucks County, we have a 1% wage tax that goes to the county and to the local municipalities. But if you work in Philadelphia, Philadelphia keeps that 4.25%, and we get zero. We do not get that 1% that everyone else has to pay into. And I think that's something that's long overdue to be addressed. I think that should be a focus. I think it was a focus on the Senate side. We have to make it a focus on the House side. And I hope that we can get that piece pushed through the House and to the governor's desk. So, thank you.
We got a few questions about workforce, and that has already been discussed this morning, and between Secretary Siger, Senator Santarsiero talking about long-term demographic trends, and I will echo that sentiment. Just last week in our Harrisburg area newspaper, the headline was Pennsylvania 4th in the nation this year for losing population. We also saw from the U.S. Department of Labor earlier this year that we're the 5th worst state in the country for net firm migration. So companies moving into Pennsylvania or starting in Pennsylvania, offset by companies that are moving out of Pennsylvania. We are tied with West Virginia for the worst state for entrepreneurs. And excuse the doom and gloom. But that's kind of the reality, and that question for the lawmakers, how from a public policy perspective can we start to reverse those trends in 10 words or less? No, I'm just kidding. But obviously a lot of ground to cover, but any initial reaction to that or thoughts on legislative response? We can go kind of maybe the opposite direction. So Representative Munroe?
I mean, not to be overly blunt, but less red tape. I think when we especially talk and look at big government, that's usually the #1 issue that people deal with. I know talking to people within the nursing fields, when people talk that work in early childhood education, it can be more difficult to get your licensing. It's more difficult to get your certifications. In Pennsylvania, there's more hoops that you have to jump through than in other states. So I think that's where I would start.
Thank you. Senator.
I think we already touched on regulations, permitting, workforce, quality education, and we haven't touched on transportation. Having the proper transportation infrastructure is significant. I think it was Representative Brennan mentioned earlier, about the PennDOT issues here. I mean, our roads are in terrible shape right now, and we had a winter that was not harsh at all. But part of that is because our Bucks County PennDOT maintenance folks are literally staffed at about 53%. So that our 47% would be the people that are fixing our roads every day. So, but again, that goes to affordable housing as well. So, but ensuring our transportation sector in the state is robust, both public transportation as well as the highway transportation, I think is something else that's important.
Thank you.
Retaining our workforce and our youth is critical. We have outstanding educational opportunities in Pennsylvania. Governor Wolf had promoted a loan forgiveness program that would encourage graduates of Pennsylvania colleges to remain in Pennsylvania. We need to continue to improve our higher education and support our higher education. And the Shapiro administration has made tremendous strides in improving and streamlining, as the Secretary mentioned, the licensing process. Several years ago, or in the early years of my tenure in office, we got a lot of calls from folks whose licenses, professional licenses, were delayed, whereas neighboring states were processing the licenses much further. And that Governor Shapiro recognized that and has made that a goal. Also, I'd note that the House passed a bill raising the minimum wage in June, and we look to our colleagues in the Senate to pass the bill as well, and Governor Shapiro to sign that bill into law to further encourage our workforce to remain in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Representative Labs, you're clearly helping with our demographic trends in Pennsylvania personally, but from a legislative perspective, can you talk about some thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So again, I will just briefly bring up the regulatory reform. One of the bills that I have currently is a regulatory sandbox bill, and it really, bottom line, aims to recruit and retain businesses in Pennsylvania, cut through some of this red tape, look at what can be, eliminated or that these businesses don't have to go through this entire long process just to get started here. The second thing I will say, and I will echo Senator Farry, Representative Warren and I were actually just recently in Philadelphia as members of the Transportation Committee, and looking at public transportation is huge. Bucks County specifically, but even in the Southeast region, some of these mass transit organizations that are struggling at the moment, that to look at the numbers of how this will impact Bucks County, getting in and out of the city and things like that, is quite staggering. So I think that that's important too, that we look in that direction a little bit as well.
Senator.
So, my colleagues have touched on a number of different issues that I think are relevant to this discussion. Education, obviously, is always foremost in my mind in terms of what we're providing and the opportunities. But again, making those investments that will help businesses start up here, move here, and grow are really critically important. And those investments in transportation infrastructure are critical too. Yesterday, I had my annual road tour of the 10th District, where I get a bunch of PennDOT Region 6 engineers to accompany me in a van, and we drive around the 10th District. My Deputy Chief of Staff, Shannon Sticker, is always the one who puts that together. Shannon did a great job this year. We saw Representative Brennan, Representative Labs, and Representative Warren during the course of the day to look at various issues in their respective districts. And, PennDOT, my friend Mike Carroll, who's the secretary, is obviously doing a great job. He and the governor deserve all of the compliments that they received for what happened on 95, but also what they did in Upper Makefield during that after that tragic flash flood back in July, where they were able to get Route 532 and Taylorsville Road opened up again in record time, and not just opened up, but improved over what it had been before. PennDOT has an amazing number of roads across the state because unlike some other states like our neighbor to the east, New Jersey, counties don't own any roads in Pennsylvania. So a lot of these roads that in other states would be a county road, it's a state road. And that is exponentially more of a burden on our state transportation agency than is the case in other places. That might be something we should look at down the road in changing, but for what we have to deal with right now is trying to be as aggressive as possible to fix the problems that are there, whether it's roads, whether it's bridges, and coming up with alternative ways in which that could be done that might be more cost effective, and that's something we talked about yesterday during our tour. On public transportation, you know, I was one of the people who voted for Act 89 back in 2013. Was not a popular vote, but it wound up putting an extra $2.5 billion into our transportation infrastructure in Pennsylvania on an annual basis. $500 million of that goes to mass transit, and obviously SEPTA, by far, is the largest mass transit agency in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but it's still not enough. And if we want to be serious about providing public transportation and alternatives for people to get to work or to get to points of recreation, then we have to think about properly funding it, and we have to think about different modes of public transportation that we could adopt that will help facilitate that. Things like long-range commuter buses that can be alternative fuel powered and therefore also have a good impact on global climate change. Pardon me. So there's a lot to talk about in this space, and obviously we don't have the time to do it this morning. But I am encouraged that Governor Shapiro has this broad approach to these issues generally, and I think we can do a lot in the next few years.
So when I think of trying to keep young people into an area, I can't help but think of where I grew up. I grew up in the coal region, and it's essentially a test case in how not to build a future for your residents. And I can sort of look back at that and see sort of the stark contrast between what I saw there and what I see here in Bucks County. And I think, you know, there are so many resources here, both in terms of the educational environment, the educational background of the residents, the environment, and the diversity of industry. So I think those are all important factors that you have to have a community. You have to have reinvestment in both people, businesses, and infrastructure. And everyone's talked about infrastructure, and it's certainly something that I'm concerned about. But I mean, if you want young people to stay in an area, you have to give them something to live for. And you know, growing up, I saw orange water, and you know, you contrast that with what we have here in Bucks County. And you know, it's an environmental playground that we have, and it's an actual economic driver as well. So, you know, having the right environment, investing in you know, the types of schools and secondary life that folks are going to have, but also you know, supporting businesses that are going to give the jobs. Like, you know, Lucas is here. We did a tour not so long ago with Governor Shapiro, and one of the issues that the Biotech Center sees is business startups, and can the state come up with you know, creative ways to help those businesses. And one of the bills we passed out of the House this year was the second stage loan program that sort of targeted those exact type of businesses and you know, provide government backing for sort of very targeted business development. Looking at healthcare, you know, there's things that we can do to make it easier for people to get degrees or to get to practice. And you know, that's something that'll keep people here as well. And you know, we've also invested in trade schools this year. I think it's a 13.3% increase in funding for trade schools. So I mean, you look at that swath of industry, and there's a little bit of investment in everything. And also, what I think we've done well here is also, you know, invest in the next generation in a way that that I think people want to be here. Now we have to control the cost of living. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about.
Great. Well, I see we are actually at our concluding time. There was one more question I was hoping to get to. You know, the question was essentially, how do we hold our elected officials accountable, especially those who have a kind of casual relationship with the truth, you know, present company excluded. I mean, I guess I would suggest that forums like this are probably the best way to hold our public servants accountable, being able to ask questions face to face, get the answers. But we only have a minute or so. I would open it up to the group if there are any quick thoughts. Yeah.
Strong local media. They're struggling.
Yeah, I would just say know what your source of information is. I think those of us that have served a little longer, like Steve, Perry, and myself, you know, we've always gotten a call from a resident, I can't believe you voted for X. And when we explain what went into that vote, they're like, well, that's not what I read, or that's not what I saw on Facebook. So please, before you judge us, get the information and reach out to hear our side, because generally, when we're going in to vote on something, we know more than the people that are reporting on what we're voting on.
Yeah, and just talk to us. Stop by the office. We are all, this panel is all out at community events all the time. We're out there happy to talk, as we were today. Several of us were here before this event started. All of us, I guess, are going to be here for a bit after. And just have conversations. Give us your thoughts. And if there are issues, ask. And I'm sure we're all happy to talk. Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say just please call us, please ask us. Again, there's a lot of times that we want to, you know, be able to explain a vote or be able to explain something or say, no, that's actually not true. So stop in, call us, community events as well. I think that's so important. And just remembering, too, that we're all members of our respective communities as well, and we all have a vested interest in this, too.
So I would agree with everything my colleagues have said. I would add one thing that's kind of related to this question, and that is we all have an obligation to restore civility to our public discourse. Because part of accountability is also having a back and forth, and today is a great example of how that can be done in a civil way and how it should be and how we can get back, hopefully, to that place where it's more the case that it is a civil discourse. Because at the end of the day, this is a representative democracy. We represent you. You ultimately decide whether you send us to Harrisburg or not. But we're not a hereditary aristocracy, you know. We are here to serve, and we're ordinary people just like everyone else who have stepped up to take these positions on to try to make a difference. But having that discourse, it improves our ability to do our work, and it makes sure that your concerns are actually being addressed. So I ask that you all be active participants in that and advocates for civility in our public discourse.
Yeah, and honestly, I can't imagine a more important question. I routinely go back to civics. We started at the beginning of the row here talking about our media and ended with responsibility with Senator Santarsiero. You know, when we come into office, we get inundated with potential laws, with memos that describe a bill that someone wants to introduce. And you know, I went through literally every one of those emails, something like 800, 900 memos about potential bills before I co-sponsored my first bill. And the first bill that I co-sponsored was a bill to get young people involved in the democratic process, to get them pre-registered and to send them information about upcoming elections and to do drives. You know, civics is a responsibility, and we have to keep it in our schools. We have to encourage it. And you know, we're all here, active citizens, and that's the way the founders intended it, that people would care, that people would work, and people would sift through information to be good citizens, and we can't rely on entertainment media to give us the TV dinner of information that we don't need. You know, we have to be active, engaged citizens. So that's what you guys are doing, and that's what we're up here for, and we're appreciative of it. So.
Please join me in thanking our elected officials. I'm now going to turn things back over to Teresa. I want to thank you all again for inviting me to be here today. And in the spirit of Daniel Casey, my predecessor from 100 years ago, please continue to support your local chamber. It's a fantastic organization. They're doing really tremendous work. Thank you.
Wow, that was tremendous. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alex, for serving as our moderator today. And thank you to all of you for joining us. Once again, thank you to our host sponsor, Delaware Valley University. We have a great partnership with you, and we love what we share together. So we're very grateful. Thank you for the beautiful venue, the food and service. I'd like to give a special shout out to Julie Kelly, who is a partner in crime to us. She makes it all happen. And the entire team here. Thank you once again to our sponsors. You make this possible. You're the magic in our organization. And if you'd like to follow us on our social media platforms, we do it in a responsible way. We love to stay connected with everyone to show you, so you can learn about what we're doing in the future, special programming as we round out 2023, and all of the great events and programs we have scheduled for 2024. So visit our website and follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and we'd love to stay connected with you. Obviously, our door is always open, and we love to hear from you. We are also here to serve. That's what we do. We empower our businesses and unite communities. That's our tagline. We take it very seriously, and we love all of you. Thank you for your support, and enjoy this beautiful weekend we have ahead.